Our scripture this morning is from the Holy Quran, Surah number 3, verse 64. People of the book, let us arrive at a statement that is common to all of us. We worship God alone. We ascribe no other partner to God, and none of us takes others as lords. Witness our devotion to God. The Holy Quran, Surah number 3, verse 64. Like many of you, I am a little troubled recently about the expulsion of diplomats from Iran and the threats against Swedish people around the world. But I am equally troubled by how it allegedly began. The burning of the Quran by an activist in Stockholm. Now, I'm not referring at all to who has a legal right or what is a proper political response. I'm simply disturbed by the simple lack of respect. The Quran is a holy book. Let's be reminded what Islam means. From the Holy Quran, Surah number 5, verse 3, Islam means submission to God or total devotion to God. As we would say, an entire religion with infinite intelligence as its primary focus. Let's be reminded that it was channeled by Muhammad around 600 Common Era from none other than Archangel Gabriel, the entire Quran, bringing a divine message to the language of the Arabic people, as we read earlier. It was brought down, as is often mentioned in the Quran, orally in 114 surahs, brought down out of chronological order, and then later by Archangel Gabriel decided what order they should be presented in. And presented, by that I mean memorized orally and then eventually written down. Just as we might read, say, the works of the 23 prophets in the Bible. Besides Allah, of course, which is mentioned 3,000 times, do you know who's mentioned the most in the Quran? Maybe from that responsorial you got an idea. Moses. Almost 135 times. Jesus, or is called Isa, 90 times. Even referred to as the Messiah. And Messiah, in definition and metaphysically, means the anointed one, not the only Son of God sitting on the right hand of God, destined to return to judge the living and the dead. No, Jesus, Isa, a prophet, a messenger. Muhammad has one surah named after him, but he's only mentioned 5 times in the third person by comparison. And by our opening scripture, people of the book, let us arrive at a statement that is common to all of us. We worship God alone. And finally, let's be reminded what the Quran means. It means the differentiator. That's what the Quran means. The differentiator between right and wrong. A membrane between right and wrong, not a separation between faiths. So you see, there's not much different between the views of Muslim, Jews, and Christians. And this makes complete sense, since they all stem from the same Abrahamic tradition. Chronologically, Abraham to Moses, más o menos, almost 400 years. And then Islam arising from the line of Ishmael. Ishmael was the first son of Abraham. That lineage, maybe 3,000 years. So burning the Quran is like burning our heritage or a book of family photos, or denying your cousins, or torching the house right next door to your own. Just last January, I went to Bethlehem in the West Bank. It is not an easy place to get to if you've ever been to parts of the West Bank. You can't take a taxi. You have to stop at the border, get another one. Or in our case, we just took a public bus, went through the border crossing, and then walked to Bethlehem, maybe a half-hour walk. I hate to disappoint you, but there's no manger. There's no cows, no donkeys. There's no Christmas ornaments. In its center, you see a cathedral. It's the Church of the Nativity, a synagogue, and a mosque, all in the central plaza, and all compete easily for airtime, communicating through bells, processions, prayers. The picture in the bulletin there depicts one of the 5 daily call to prayers in Islam. This is Bethlehem, a membrane between 3 great religions in the middle of a town square. I even like that the picture catches a lens flare to kind of show that little boundary, which is so thin. A membrane, a thin sheet of material forming a barrier, and a thin sheet of cell tissue acting as a boundary in an organism. The space inside the membrane of each of our almost 3 trillion cells is called the intracellular matrix. And it's filled with organelles and proteins and the nucleus and almost anything else you can think of swimming around in something called cytosol. Now, we might equate that to our own personal interior life, our thoughts, our feelings, our spirituality, where our skin then would act as a membrane to others. And then in the cellular world, what's outside the cell is called the extracellular matrix. It helps cells attach and move, grow, and heal. But its primary function is cell-to-cell communication, as we might use speech, music, drawings, writing, a smile, laughter, just like a plaza in Bethlehem. The extracellular space is shockingly thin, literally as thin as a piece of paper, as in the Quran, as thin as a piece of paper in the Bible. A paper-thin tissue between cells, between people, between cultures, between theologies. It's kind of ironic that it's paper that burns so quickly, the preferred method of protesting all sorts of books these days. And this thin membrane is so relevant to us as metaphysicians because we are constantly challenged to look within for a personal reflection of exterior trends, ideas, and manifestations. We are challenged over and over again to find the interior correlates to any problem, outcome, or global condition. This is what makes us accountable. It's the essence of our 4th principle. We're responsible for our own happiness or unhappiness as we live in accord with natural, spiritual, or physical laws. Inside the cell, outside the cell. Inside ourselves, outside ourselves. It makes us part of the soup, which means that any external condition is a reflection of ourselves or our group mentality. That doesn't make it our individual fault, but nor does it make it the fault of another. It's the response of our collective consciousness. So this means we must constantly be checking the membrane for signs and lessons. That paper-thin difference between cells is that same paper thin distance that blocks us from feeling one with divine source. A razor thin tissue between feel connected, not connected, connected, not connected, connected, not connected. In the early mornings, before my personality snaps into place, I sometimes get a glimpse that this membrane is where the God within meets the God without. And it doesn't mean that we're relegated to some distant border crossing waiting for signs from the wilderness. No, the joy of existence is witnessing this interaction between the God within and the God without. It's not passive at all. It's like taking a front row seat on creation itself. A cell, a state, a language, a nation, a religion, you yourselves are only a paper thin membrane between the God within and the God without. If that's balanced, oh, what a glorious view. We are ready for an extension of this principle as a congregation. Our inner world, the intracellular matrix of this chapel, I would pose is practically perfect. The feeling, the support, the inner life of AMC is just so healthy. There's not one person I know who does not enter our chapel and just sigh. But that also means it's time for the outer form to catch up. The God within meets the God without, equally. I pray that we can see this not as a burden of allocating resources or as a marketing technique, but as a simple spiritual joy of witnessing the divine act of creation. The membrane is where life is at its most active. Updating, polishing, giving our chapel a makeover is creation. Or as the Quran would say, witness our devotion to God in physical form. Before we sing, and you may be seated for this, hymn number 181. I have been overly reliant upon this hymn lately, I admit. But it bears remembering that membranes are living, breathing, pulsating with life between phases of God, between you and God, between others, between our inner and our outer worlds. It lives, it breathes, it heals, all in the present of this paper-thin membrane. May it be revealed to you today and the coming days ahead as a divine gift it is, not a space to inflame differences, but where the God within meets the God without. And by the way, whenever I come here, I am deeply honored to share the extracellular matrix with all of you. Blessings to you.